Hi, I'm Seamless, and today I'm going to show you how to make this sound. Yeah! Alright, there's two primary things that make this possible. This is one Harmor, all by itself, no automation, but what I can get done with moving around the velocity and the X parameter inside this one pattern on the one Harmor with no effects on it, but what can be done within it. This is an ARP, obviously, engaged in here. The key thing that makes it work, though, is that when FL sends out these colors, this is the information that it uses to send out MIDI channels, that it knows that, like, you're going to trigger a different instrument. But when you send these things into like the same sound, what it understands that to mean is that it is a different voice entirely. This is important because this lets you do things like slide two different notes in two different directions if you're going to do that. Because if you played a chord in just one color and you slid that with one note, it would slide the whole chord towards that one note. But if you used a different color and you slid it, it would do the thing two different directions. And so too is this true with the ARP modifier. In the little tab up here where we get the things inside the channel window, it turns whatever notes you're playing, whatever chord, into an arpeggiation. Normally, though, this would all come out as just one individual line of notes. But if you trigger more than one color at a time, it understands to make them their own little ARP universe. It'll only ARP these three, only ARP these two, and ARP these four. And it'll play them all simultaneously with all of their individual settings, all of their individual pieces of like velocity and X. And you can see here velocity is like considerable. And despite that being all over the place, you can still kind of hear everything all the time. And that's because velocity isn't actually triggering level in this track, in this sound here. It's just triggering everything else. And I have it set up in a very kind of long macro sense. Like this is the cutoff frequency for the filter, for example. And this is the very beginning of the velocity. The lower quarter of it runs through the entire filter range. And then after that, other effects kick in. The unison doesn't kick in until the very end of the range. The phaser kicks in kind of in the middle of the range. The prism also kicks in near the end of the range. Like the phase moves around, this moves around more at the end. The Nutzer stuff is the end, and there's like a progression of the usual things that tend to make ARPs out of. It's gonna be super saw stuff. So I like when I'm making more than one of them, because I usually do want to make more than one, because I want to have something like this usually. This is almost always what I'm going to want to do, unless I'm making one really specific, really like essentially a lead instrument. And that being the case, it is a bit of a, not so much a waste of time, but a bit of a bother to have to make multiples of these. Because then to make various different changes, because the changes aren't even that big and they're not that important. It's important that they're there. It's important that you're making a cool sound and all, but it's only really important that you have your primary first thing, and everything after that is important in terms of texture and creating the sound to make it specific and whatnot. But each individual new thing you add has to be less than the previous one. It can't overshadow it in order for it all to show at once as being part of the thing, and not just like 7 things on top of each other, unless you're doing 7 things on top of each other. And so the meaning of this is that if I am just trying to make like a filler detail ridden thing, then I just have to make it possible for there to be differences. So with this very like super changed up like velocity range, like just a demo what it's like. It runs through quite a bit of stuff. And it's not so much that I wanted one sound to actually run through all of that as an expression that can be tracked. It's more like that's just like I have made myself the ARP setting, and here's my one knob on the stuff I tend to want out of an ARP. And now I can do that, and I can set them all to be individually in their own individual ARP universes. So it is as though out of this one thing, I have 3 different ARPs, 3 different ARP patches. Only bummer is that I can't change the speed. I can't actually alter the time and rate of the notes individually unless I get specific and actually do it on purpose, like this. This wasn't on purpose. This was a mistake. This is like not in the middle of the plugin, or the beat rather, and I straight up just put it out there. But that little delay caused it to start the ARP that late, and it overlapped in a way that made it sound like the speed changed for a second. Which is pretty cool because as far as like time savers go, which is the whole point of this, that means that I can throw in the impression of the ARP changing rate without actually changing its rate. And, or, you know, if I'm not 100% sure if this is actual laziness or quantum laziness, but I could just write an ARP. If I really want to keep it in one plugin, I could just have a base ARP rate, do kind of like this for these moments, these little fill moments. And then the rest of the time when I really want to be specific about like being Philip Glass, I could just write notes. I could just write out the notes and call it a day. But ultimately, the whole point of this guy is that if you trigger an ARP setting with more than one color, each color will be their own ARP. And if you make a range of settings in available like module, and I didn't even use all of them. I just used X to make sort of a filter range and velocity to make that huge change. But if you set up something like this, you can basically act as though you have more than one patch happening at the same time with one thing, depending on if you link up all the parameters to act like it. If you want to have this guy, this will be available to download in the description of this video. If you have any questions about it, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all of that fun stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.